If you had any bullets, you would have shot me already. Move.
We are talking The Collective, which is essentially a low-budget version of the Kingsman movie. And this one has a pretty good cast. It stars Lucas Till as our main character, Sam. And you've also got roles for Don Johnson, Sasha Banks, Tyrese Gibson, Ruby Rose, and a couple of other familiar faces as well. And, it focuses on the Lucas Till character, who is a new recruit to this kind of, independent spy organisation called The Collective. And they've been compromised, and there's a human trafficker bad guy who's kidnapped one of their analyst agents or something, who's revealed all of their IDs. So Lucas Till's character, as he's a new recruit, isn't actually on their system yet. So he's able to try and use that to get access where maybe the others can't. So it's like this new rookie recruit to try and break into this human trafficking ring where Ruby Rose and Sasha Banks are the female henchmen, basically, and take it down, rescue the informant and anyone else he can in the process. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss it. So I think Tom DeNucci is the director here, who's actually an actor by trade. How did he do? Well, let's talk about the positives first of all. So it's a pretty stacked cast for a low-budget film, I have to say. I've always quite liked Lucas Till. He was I think Havoc in the X-Men prequel series, and I think he's done the MacGyver series, which I've never watched, to be honest. But I actually do quite like him. I think he's fairly good leading man material. And I think he does a reasonable job here. His character is underdeveloped, which we'll talk about, but I think he does a good job as a somewhat of a more wide-eyed recruit who just wants to please. I really like Don Johnson in this role. He's like the head of this collective, which is this independent spy organisation. They're a little bit like the Kingsman. He doesn't have a huge amount of screen time, and his role is more or less just sitting in a boardroom discussing stuff. But I still quite liked his energy, his character, and his charisma. I've always been a big fan of Miami Vice here. So yeah, he's quite like our bad guy as well. Is also this he's a recognisable character actor whose name escapes me now. But he's got these weird little personality tics, like he's constantly dancing around and acting a little bit nutty. So I thought he was quite a fun character in his in his own right. And I actually, when we get to the scene of this this auction, this human trafficking auction, I actually quite like the way it was played, because he plays it like he's doing this award show almost, in the way he's talking to the audience and stuff, oh, it's great to see you, bloody blood. I thought it was quite fun, and obviously it's very much in the the public speaking style that you've seen on various award shows and auctions and things like that, but it was obviously for human slaves and stuff, which I thought was quite a fun choice. So there are some some moments that the characters I feel are quite fun. There's a reasonable amount of action in this in this movie. I quite like the fact that they address that our main character is relatively new and needs help in that respect. So that was alright. And it feels like a TV show pilot. I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I think maybe this movie may have been envisioned as a pilot for a TV show. It's maybe a little gory for a TV show to get picked up on network TV, but there's a couple of gore shots in it. I wonder if that's been added in post, if I'm honest, because everything else seems quite sanitised. Which leads me on to what does not work. Okay, So this was like a CW TV pilot, I have to say. It really does. I mean, some of the actors, you know, Lucas Tillis I've mentioned is in the MacGyver show. You've got Ruby Rose who was in Batwoman. So some of these kind of actors, you know, typically work in TV. You've got like Tyrese Gibson and that, who obviously in the Fast and Furious franchise. So there are kind of like movie actors in there, but they have sort of the small roles. But yeah, it has this kind of like this TV feel to it. And now I mean a kind of CW kind of TV feel. One of the things that struck me the most, kind of, without, if I could have used that as a more encompassing kind of, sort of umbrella, so to speak, is some poorly handled action sequences. I gotta say, I thought these action sequences were very, very poorly handled. I mean, they just didn't seem particularly well choreographed. And we're talking like, you know, hand-to-hand and kind of gunplay. Neither of them looked convincing. They all just seemed like, you know, the bad guys were just kind of standing out in the open, ready to get kind of picked off, and they seem to be a little bit delayed in their reaction. It just looks really silly. I'll give you one specific example. So we have this auction, and there's a kind of like a backstage area where all the kind of like the henchmen are kind of like hanging out. And they're kind of like, you know, we have our kind of protagonist kind of behind the scenes, and no one knows he's there yet. And we got this kind of group of henchmen kind of like sitting around playing cards like behind the scenes, and they're all wearing balaclavas. I thought, what, you know, just like, it just seems silly because it's clearly there to kind of dehumanize them. So, you know, our protagonist seems like they're he's just shooting faceless goons. But it was just like, and obviously they were kind of probably reusing stuntmen and things like this. But yeah, it was just like a really weird and odd thing. Because, like, you know, at that point they're just behind the scenes and they've all got their kind of balaclavas on. It was just an odd choice. But yeah, the action isn't good. So it's just very poorly kind of staged. Even with some of the kind of like the named kind of actors and stuff here. Sasha Banks, you know, I know that's not her actual name. I'm not familiar really with wrestling, so. But, you know, I know she was in like The Mandalorian. She has a couple of fight scenes. I didn't think they were particularly well handled. You know, we've got like CGI muzzle flashes, which I know is a little bit of a kind of, you know, bone of contention now because of obviously what happened with the set of Rust, where that person was killed by a live round. So they're kind of switching more to CGI. So I do understand that, but it kind of looks. I mean, just don't have muzzle flashes, I would say. You know, so yeah, it's just the action isn't well handled. There's virtually no characterization. We got a new character of Sam, played by Lucas Till, and we just see him he just turns up at this kind of like first scene as this new recruit. We know nothing about his character. We get a little bit of like, he used to be some type of like lawyer before this, and I thought, what qualifies him to be in this kind of like elite kind of spy unit then? It just seemed like he's obviously had sort of military training, but it's like never really addressed. Yeah, he used to be some type of lawyer. I was like, that seems like an odd choice. Yeah, he's able to take down a group of like various kind of like, you know, trained killers and stuff with seemingly very little training. So it's very kind of like sloppy in regards to its character building. Ruby Rose's character, you may as well not even have in it, because like she brings absolutely nothing to the kind of the movie. Her role is just virtually a cameo, and her character does absolutely nothing. So some of the which leads me to some of the acting. Some of the acting isn't good. You know, we have some fun moments, I would say, through the movie. And there are some actors who I think were good, like I mentioned, kind of Don Johnson. But others aren't great, and I include Tyrese Gibson in this, I'm afraid. You know, I think Lucas Till is okay. I don't think he's given much to play with, but, you know, he's okay. But, yeah, Tyrese Gibson, some of the other kind of the actors as well, don't fare particularly kind of well. It's very much a kind of plot of the week of like some type. If you can imagine there was a Kingsman TV show, the plot isn't anything special really. It's kind of like a human trafficking ring, which isn't really explained all that much. You know, so it's kind of. But we've got like, yeah, it's just like a little bit silly. The kind of all the girls are dressed in like bikinis and stuff, and they've got like, you know, they're all chained up in like little wimpy chains and things like this. So it's just like a real like cheap kind of like bottom of the barrel kind of like 80s style kind of like Andy Sedaris movie in some ways, but without the kind of like the TNA, but has this kind of like CW aesthetic. Doesn't sound all that appealing, does it? Like outside of a few moments here, I really don't think there's much to recommend this film, to be honest. It's not the worst action sort of low budget movie I've seen, but I gotta be honest with you, these kind of low budget action films really just blend into kind of like a gelatinous blob, really, because I don't think a lot of them really kind of stand out for the crowd. At least with horrors, they have like, there's more kind of variety you can get from it, but the action films, I think they struggle to find much of an identity. I'll give it a 4 out of 10. It's not a terrible movie, but it's certainly forgettable and below average in my opinion. So 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to you next time. Bye for now.